There's a moment that happens in every conversation, every meeting, every interaction where you feel it creeping in. That small voice that whispers, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I shouldn't speak up, maybe they know better. And in that exact moment, something invisible but devastating occurs. Power transfers, not through force, not through aggression, but through your own internal surrender. You think doubt is just a feeling, a temporary hesitation, a sign of humility. But what if I told you that doubt is actually a weapon, not one you wield, but one that's wielded against you? Every time you question your own judgment, someone else's becomes the default. Every time you second-guess your instincts, someone else's agenda moves forward. The most dangerous battles aren't fought with swords or guns. They're fought in the quiet spaces of your mind, where your confidence either stands firm or crumbles. And most people don't even realize they're losing a war they never knew they were fighting. This isn't about becoming arrogant or refusing all feedback. This is about understanding a psychological mechanism so subtle, so pervasive, that it shapes every relationship, every decision, every outcome in your life. Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps, understood something profound about human psychology. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. But what happens when that choice is slowly eroded? When doubt becomes your default setting? When questioning yourself becomes so automatic that you forget you even have the right to trust your own mind? If you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling smaller, if you've ever changed your opinion just to avoid conflict, if you've ever felt like everyone else seems more confident than you, then this message is for you. Because what you're about to discover will change how you see every interaction for the rest of your life. Doubt doesn't just appear randomly in your mind. It's planted there, cultivated, nurtured by people who understand that the easiest way to control someone isn't through force, but through making them distrust themselves. Think about the people in your life who never seem to question themselves. They speak with certainty, make decisions quickly, rarely apologize for their opinions. Now think about how you feel around them. Smaller, less sure, more willing to defer to their judgment. That's not coincidence. That's psychological architecture. Alfred Adler, the pioneer of individual psychology, identified what he called the inferiority complex, not just feeling inferior, but being systematically conditioned to feel that way. He observed that people don't naturally doubt themselves this much. They're taught to. They're shaped by environments, relationships, and systems that benefit from their uncertainty. Your doubt serves someone else's certainty. Your hesitation creates space for their boldness. Your questions about your own worth become the foundation for their authority. This isn't philosophy, this is strategy. And you've been on the losing side without even knowing the game was being played. Consider how many times you've changed your mind, not because new evidence appeared, but simply because someone else seemed more sure than you. How many opportunities you've let slip by because you weren't certain enough. How many times you've apologized for opinions that were actually correct, just because someone else expressed disagreement with confidence. The most effective manipulation doesn't feel like manipulation at all. It feels like wisdom, like guidance, like someone helping you see your blind spots. But there's a crucial difference between genuine feedback and psychological undermining. One strengthens your ability to think clearly, the other weakens it systematically. Watch how certain people operate in your life. They don't attack your ideas directly. That would create obvious conflict. Instead, they attack your confidence in having those ideas. They plant seeds of doubt about your judgment, your experience, your right to think what you're thinking. They use phrases like, "Are you sure?" or "Don't you think you might be overthinking this?" These aren't innocent questions. They're precision strikes against your mental sovereignty. The insidious part is that this conditioning often begins early. Parents who consistently override children's instincts, teachers who punish questions that challenge authority, friends who mock uncertainty instead of supporting growth, Romantic partners who frame every disagreement as evidence of your emotional instability. Slowly, layer by layer, your natural confidence gets eroded. And here's the cruelest twist. The people doing this often aren't consciously malicious. They're operating from their own deep-seated need for control, validation, or superiority. They've learned that diminishing others feels easier than building themselves up. They've discovered that your uncertainty creates space for their authority. Your doubt becomes the fertile ground where their influence grows. But recognition is the first step toward freedom. Once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it. Once you understand that your doubt often serves someone else's agenda, you begin to question whether that doubt is even yours to begin with. There's a term in psychology called learned helplessness, when someone becomes so accustomed to having no control that they stop trying to assert it, even when they actually could. But there's something even more insidious: learned deference. When you become so used to trusting other people's judgment over your own that you forget you even have judgment. This doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual erosion, like water wearing away stone. A comment here about how you might be overthinking. A suggestion there that you're too emotional to see clearly. A pattern of having your concerns dismissed as paranoid or sensitive. Slowly, you begin to internalize the message that your perspective can't be trusted. Rollo May, the existential psychologist, wrote extensively about what he called ontological anxiety, the fundamental uncertainty about one's own existence and worth. He observed that people will do almost anything to escape this anxiety, including surrendering their autonomy to anyone who appears more confident than they feel. What makes this particularly devastating is that the people you're deferring to often aren't more qualified than you. They've simply learned to mask their uncertainty better. They've developed the skill of projecting confidence even when they don't possess competence. They speak in absolutes while you speak in probabilities. They make declarations while you ask questions. But here's what Rollo May understood that most people miss. Every time you defer to someone else's judgment over your own gut feeling, you're not just making a single decision. You're training your brain to distrust itself. You're reinforcing a neural pathway that says, when in doubt, someone else knows better. The mind is remarkably adaptable. If you consistently override your own instincts in favor of external authority, those instincts begin to atrophy. Like a muscle that's never used, your capacity for independent judgment weakens. And other people can sense this. They can smell uncertainty the way predators smell fear. This creates what psychologists call an authority gradient, an invisible hierarchy where some people's thoughts automatically carry more weight than others. Not because of expertise or wisdom, but because of projected confidence. The person who speaks first, speaks loudest, or speaks with the most certainty often wins, regardless of the quality of their ideas. Think about your last team meeting, family discussion, or social gathering. Who dominated the conversation? Whose ideas were adopted without question? Whose suggestions were dismissed or ignored? You'll likely find that the hierarchy had little to do with actual knowledge and everything to do with the willingness to appear certain. This is why some people seem to naturally command respect while others struggle for it. It's not about inherent worth or intelligence. It's about who has trained themselves to trust their own mind versus who has been trained to doubt it. It's about who learned to act decisively despite uncertainty versus who learned to hesitate until someone else provides direction. The tragedy is that the people with the most valuable insights often stay silent because they've been conditioned to question their own perceptions. Meanwhile, those with the loudest voices often have the least to say. Our culture has created a system where confidence trumps competence, where certainty beats wisdom, where the appearance of knowing matters more than actual understanding. And you, if you're like most people, have been trained to participate in your own subordination. You've learned to doubt yourself as a form of politeness, humility, or social cooperation. But what feels like virtue is often just another form of submission. In any relationship, in any group, in any organization, there's an invisible economy of confidence. Some people accumulate it, others spend it, and many never realize they're giving it away for free. Watch what happens in your next meeting, your next social gathering, your next family dinner. Notice who speaks first, who gets interrupted, whose ideas get adopted without question versus whose get picked apart. The people at the top of this hierarchy aren't necessarily the smartest or most qualified. They're simply the most certain. Erich Fromm, who studied the psychology of authoritarianism, identified something he called escape from freedom, the tendency to surrender autonomy to avoid the anxiety of making independent decisions. He observed that many people would rather be told what to think than deal with the uncertainty of thinking for themselves. This creates a perfect storm. The more you doubt yourself, the more attractive, strong, certain personalities become. The more you defer to their judgment, the more your own atrophies. The weaker your confidence becomes, the more you need external validation. It's a feedback loop that can trap you for decades. But here's the part that will really disturb you. Most of the people you're deferring to aren't actually more competent than you. They're just more comfortable with uncertainty. They've learned to act decisively even when they don't have complete information. They've learned to speak with authority even when they're not entirely sure. The difference between confidence and competence is vast. Confidence is simply the willingness to act despite doubt. Competence is the ability to act effectively. You can have one without the other. And our culture consistently rewards confidence over competence, creating a world where the most certain voices often belong to the least qualified people. Consider the last time you were in a situation where you had valuable input but didn't speak up because you weren't sure enough. Now consider how many times you've watched someone else confidently state something that was partially or completely wrong, yet face no consequences because they delivered it with conviction. This dynamic plays out everywhere. In boardrooms, where the loudest voice gets the promotion. In relationships, where the more certain partner makes all the decisions. In social groups, where the most opinionated person sets the agenda. In families, where the most assertive member defines reality for everyone else. Your uncertainty becomes their opportunity. Your hesitation becomes their opening. Your self-doubt becomes their stepping stone to authority. Every question you ask about your own judgment is an invitation for someone else to provide theirs. Every moment you spend second-guessing yourself is a moment someone else spends solidifying their position as the decision-maker. The most skilled power seekers understand this instinctively. They don't need to be right. They just need to appear more certain than you. They don't need to have better ideas. They just need to present their ideas with more conviction. They don't need to be smarter. They just need to make you feel dumber. And the weapon they use is so subtle, you might not even notice it. They simply refuse to doubt themselves in your presence, while encouraging you to doubt yourself constantly. They present their opinions as facts, while treating your facts as opinions. They speak in certainties, while training you to speak in qualifications. This isn't accidental. This is psychological warfare disguised as normal conversation. There are people who have turned your self-doubt into their personal toolkit. They know exactly which buttons to push, which insecurities to activate, which questions to plant in your mind to make you defer to their judgment. They've learned to phrase challenges to your thinking in ways that sound helpful. Are you sure about that? Have you really thought this through? Don't you think you might be missing something? These aren't innocent questions. They're precision strikes against your confidence, designed to make you retreat into uncertainty. The most skilled manipulators don't attack your ideas directly. That would create obvious conflict, which you might resist. Instead, they attack your right to have those ideas. They make you question whether you're qualified to think what you're thinking, feel what you're feeling, want what you're wanting. Gaslighting gets a lot of attention these days, but But there's something more subtle and perhaps more dangerous: confidence erosion. It's not about making you doubt reality. It's about making you doubt your ability to interpret reality correctly. It's not about changing the facts. It's about making you distrust your capacity to understand them. Watch how this plays out in your relationships. Notice the people who consistently frame your certainty as arrogance, your boundaries as selfishness, your opinions as overreactions. They're not just disagreeing with your position, they're undermining your right to have a position at all. They use phrases like, "You're being too sensitive," "You're overthinking this," "You're making a big deal out of nothing," "You're taking this too personally." Each of these statements has the same underlying message. Your perception is flawed, your judgment is compromised, your reaction is inappropriate. Trust me instead. Anna Freud, daughter of Sigmund Freud and a pioneer in defense mechanisms, identified something called identification with the aggressor. Sometimes people adopt the attitudes and behaviors of those who have power over them as a way of psychological survival. You might find yourself using the same doubt-inducing phrases on yourself that others have used on you. You might catch yourself thinking, "Maybe I am being too sensitive," or "Maybe I am overthinking this," not because you've carefully evaluated the situation, but because you've internalized the voice of people who benefit from your uncertainty. You've learned to gaslight yourself, saving them the trouble. This is why certain people always seem to get their way, even when their ideas aren't particularly good. They've learned to make others uncertain while projecting absolute certainty themselves. They create what psychologists call an authority gradient, an invisible hierarchy where their thoughts automatically carry more weight than yours. But here's what they don't want you to know. Their certainty is often just as manufactured as your doubt. The difference is they've learned to perform confidence while you've learned to perform humility. They've learned to trust their first instinct while you've learned to second-guess yours. The tragedy is that many people spend their entire lives deferring to authorities who are no more qualified than they are, simply because those authorities never learned to doubt themselves. Meanwhile, the people with the most valuable insights often stay silent because they've been trained to question their own perceptions. If this is hitting home, if you're recognizing these patterns in your own life, then hit that subscribe button. Because what we're exploring here isn't just psychology, it's liberation. And the people who understand these dynamics are the ones who break free from them. The next layer is even more disturbing, because we haven't just talked about how your doubt serves others. We need to talk about what happens when you refuse to doubt yourself anymore, when you start trusting your own judgment, when you begin speaking with conviction rather than constant qualification. That's when the real resistance begins. Perhaps the most heartbreaking thing about this dynamic is watching intelligent, capable people silence themselves because they've been convinced their thoughts don't matter. They sit in meetings with valuable insights but don't speak up because they're not sure enough. They stay in relationships where their needs aren't met because they've been taught that asserting those needs is selfish. They accept treatment they know is wrong because they've lost trust in their own judgment. But there comes a moment in every awakening person's life when they realize that their doubt has been a gift to others, that their humility has been someone else's opportunity, that their second-guessing has been someone else's opening to take control. This realization is often painful because it forces you to see how much power you've given away unnecessarily. How many opportunities you've missed because you weren't sure enough. How many times you've been right but convinced yourself you were wrong. How many people have benefited from your uncertainty while contributing nothing to your clarity. But this pain is also the beginning of something powerful, the reclamation of your own mental authority. Not the authority to be right about everything, but the authority to think for yourself, to trust your perceptions, to value your insights, to act on your convictions even when others disagree. William James, the father of American psychology, understood something profound about the nature of belief and confidence. He wrote that the ultimate test for us of what a truth means is the conduct it dictates or inspires. In other words, the value of trusting yourself isn't measured by whether you're always right, but by whether that trust leads to a life that feels authentic and empowering. This doesn't mean becoming closed to feedback or immune to doubt. It means becoming the primary architect of your own certainty rather than a consumer of others. It means learning to generate confidence from within rather than seeking it from without. The irony is that the more you trust yourself, the more trustworthy you become to others. People sense when you have a solid center, when your opinions come from genuine reflection rather than borrowed authority. There's something magnetic about someone who thinks for themselves, even when you disagree with their conclusions. But the path to self-trust isn't easy. It requires you to sit alone with your thoughts and decide which ones are genuinely yours versus which ones you've absorbed from others. It requires you to distinguish between healthy self-reflection and destructive self-doubt. It requires you to build a relationship with uncertainty that doesn't immediately collapse into deference. Most importantly, it requires you to understand that your doubt is not a character flaw. It's often a sign that you've been surrounded by people who benefit from your uncertainty. And the moment you stop providing that benefit, everything changes. When you stop doubting yourself automatically, when you start trusting your own judgment, when you begin speaking with conviction rather than constant qualification, something predictable happens: resistance. The people who have been benefiting from your uncertainty will not celebrate your newfound confidence. They will find it threatening, arrogant, uncomfortable. They will try to restore the old dynamic where their certainty was unquestioned and your doubt was automatic. They might tell you you're becoming difficult or stubborn. They might accuse you of not listening to feedback or being closed-minded. They might even question whether something is wrong with you for being so different lately. This isn't coincidence. This is the natural response of a system that was built on your subordination. But here's what you need to understand. Their discomfort is proof that you're reclaiming something that was always yours. Their accusations are evidence that the old power dynamic is shifting. Their attempts to restore your doubt are confirmation that your confidence was threatening their control. The hardest part isn't building self-trust. It's maintaining it in the face of people who have a vested interest in your uncertainty. It's continuing to value your own judgment when others are actively trying to undermine it. It's staying centered in your own knowing when everyone around you is suggesting you're wrong. This is why most people give up. The social cost of confidence can feel overwhelming. It's easier to go back to doubting yourself than to deal with the pressure to return to your subordinate role. It's more comfortable to defer to others than to bear the responsibility of thinking for yourself. But consider the alternative, a lifetime of giving away your power to people who may not even be qualified to hold it. A lifetime of silencing your voice because others speak louder. A lifetime of treating your own thoughts as less valuable than those of people who have simply learned to perform certainty better than you. The most radical act in a world that profits from your insecurity is simply trusting yourself, not blindly, not arrogantly, but consistently, treating your own thoughts, feelings, and instincts as valid starting points rather than problems to be solved. This requires something most people aren't willing to do, sitting with uncertainty without immediately surrendering to someone else's certainty. It requires building your tolerance for not knowing while maintaining your right to think, feel, and choose. It requires understanding that confidence isn't about never being wrong. It's about being willing to be wrong on your own terms rather than being right on someone else's. It's about owning your mistakes rather than avoiding all possibility of making them. When you truly reclaim your mental authority, when you stop giving your power away every time you feel uncertain, when you learn to trust your own mind as the primary source of truth about your own experience, something remarkable happens. You become unmanageable, not in a destructive way, but in a liberating way. People can no longer control you through your own self-doubt. They can no longer use your uncertainty as a doorway into your decision-making process. They can no longer benefit from your hesitation. And that's when you realize the truth that changes everything. Your doubt was never really about you. It was about them. It was about maintaining a system where some people's voices matter more than others, where some people's certainty is valued more than others' wisdom, where some people get to be right by default while others have to earn the right to speak. But you don't have to participate in that system anymore. You don't have to make your doubt available as currency for someone else's authority. You don't have to treat your uncertainty as evidence that someone else should make your decisions. You can doubt yourself and still trust your judgment. You can be uncertain and still act with confidence. You can question your thoughts without surrendering your right to think them. If you've made it this far, if these words are landing somewhere deep inside you, then you're ready for the final understanding. You're ready to see doubt not as a personal failing, but as a social construct. You're ready to reclaim the authority over your own mind that you never should have given away. Write in the comments below, "I trust my own mind." Not because you never doubt yourself, but because you refuse to let that doubt automatically transfer your power to someone else. Because you understand that in a world full of people pretending to know more than they do, your honest uncertainty might be the most valuable thing you possess. And don't stop here. The next video will show you exactly how to build unshakable inner authority, how to think for yourself in a world that profits from your confusion, how to trust your judgment in a culture that undermines it at every turn. Remember, every time you doubt yourself unnecessarily, someone else gains power over your life. But every time you trust your own mind, you reclaim the authority that was always yours. The choice, as always, is yours. Choose wisely.